I'll start it up now then. Hello everyone, my name is Nico Sigler. I'm a member of the Indiana Latino Democratic Caucus, and I'm a founding member of our 9th District chapter. Before we really get started, with everything going on right now, we want to reaffirm the Indiana Latino Democratic Caucus's commitment to Black Lives Matter, and that we are here to do the work for pressing for reforms to policing, fixing an unjust criminal system, and addressing racial disparities across the state and the nation. Get that across. It's a lot going on right now. Bloomington, in fact, is having a protest currently. This is where I'm at. So with that said, welcome everyone to the Indiana Democratic Caucus candidate panel. And thank you for all of y'all joining. This panel is a part of an ongoing effort for our caucus to engage Latino voters and inspire leaders in our community to run and represent us at every level of government. I'm going to go over a couple of housekeeping rules before we get everything started. First, if you hear anything that resonates with you, anyone listening, please share it on your social media. We'd love for you to be engaged with us on our Facebook and our Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @INLatinoDems, all one word. Also want to let everyone know this is a recorded conversation, so we'll be sure to share it later for anyone who wasn't able to join us today. For the Q&A, please use the Q&A function that Zoom provides. We have a few questions already that we were given to us earlier that we're going to use to talk with our panelists with, and then we'll open it up to everyone else. For the panelists, I explained this a little bit later, but for those who didn't hear, I kind of have a list of y'all's names, and when I ask a question, I will start with the first person and then go from there. And then the second question will start with the person who's second on the list and then keep going. So that way everyone gets a chance to talk and we all kind of rotate and don't start with the same person. So with all that out of the way, I would like the speakers to introduce themselves, starting off with Christina Hale.
Well, thank you everyone for having me here. Thank you for your leadership. The Latino Caucus plays a really vital role in the present and future of our party. So thank you for convening and including me. And I also just want to reaffirm as well, Black lives do matter. We are at a time of crisis and we can't shy away from confronting systemic racism in our country. That said, I'm Christina Hale. I'm running for Congress. I'm the Democratic nominee for the 5th Congressional District, and I've served 2 terms in the Indiana General Assembly. I'm from Michigan City, Indiana, from the extreme northwest of the state, but I've made my home here in Indianapolis for more than the last 20 years. I'm Cuban American. My grandmother came here as an orphan to this country. She was welcomed and supported, and that's the role that I want to play for others. That's something my mom did here in Indiana when Castro opened the prisons in the 1980s, and so many refugees came to our state. And as a person elected office in the past and hope to be in the future, these are issues that we just cannot shy away from, and I'm determined to do something good about it.
All right, thank you. Next, can we have Representative Earl Harris?
Sure. Hello, everybody. Glad to be here. Appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this, and I value the importance of this. Earl Harris Jr., I actually kind of have a little different story. I follow in the footsteps of my parents. My father served for 33 years before passing away, and then my mother served for a year and 7 days, I think, actually. And then I was elected. I'm currently the 0.5 of the 1.5 Latinos in the Indiana House of Representatives, along with Mara. And, you know, one of the things that has been important is to really push and help Latinos get involved with the legislature. You know, my mother actually served a year with Christina in the state house. And so, you know, we really, when you look at the state house and what's going on there, you have Mara and I as the 2 elected. We'll see, hopefully we can add some other faces I know that are on here in there. But really in terms of getting Latinos involved, in terms of lobbyists, in terms of working at the state house, all those things. You know, one of the things I know I heard, and I'm sure Amada has heard up here in Northwest Indiana is, well, besides you 2, there's nobody in the state house. And so it's been important for us to work on that. My legislative assistant is Latino. Mada's is also Latina. And so we really see the importance of making sure that we get involved and become a part of what's going on at the state government level, whether it's as an elected, whether it's as on staff, whether it's with an agency or as a lobbyist. There are a lot of roles we can play, and we need to know that we can do that, and we need to continue to work on growing those numbers.
Thank you. Next, we have Pablo, if you'd like to go on.
Yeah, hi, my name's Pablo Hurtado. Thanks for having me on. I am the president of the Latino Democrats of Allen County, which is the county caucus for Latinos here in Fort Wayne. And I'm running for state representative in District 85 here in Fort Wayne. And just doing my part to, represent Latinos and try to help those who are in our communities who feel they haven't been represented, while they've lived here.
All right, thank you. Monica?
Hey, my name is Monica Casanova. I live in Lafayette, Indiana, and I'm running for county council at large for Tippecanoe County. I'm a first-time candidate. I am vice president of the Greater Lafayette Immigrant Allies, and I'm also assistant director for Lafayette Urban Ministries Immigration Clinic. My story is a little different from what I've heard, but more common. I think my parents and I were undocumented, and we came in the early 80s, and it was during the amnesty law that we were able to adjust status. And because of that amnesty, I'm here with you today.
All right, thank you. And next, Representative Candelaria Reardon.
Hi, I am Candelaria Reardon. I am the 12th District State Representative, and I'm also the Indiana House Democrat Caucus Chair. And I was recently a candidate for the United States Congress in the primary and suffered a crushing defeat, but here I am hoping to inspire you to step up and take a swing. I mean, the truth of the matter is that regardless of the outcome, I don't regret running. I really believe that the state of Indiana needs to see Latinos running and needs to be able to see us as leaders in this state. And, as the first Latina elected to the General Assembly in 2006, in 2020, I'm still the only one. I'm still the only Latina, Earl, not Latino. And so, I mean, that's not okay. It's not okay that in 2006 I was the first, and in 2020 I'm still the only one. I mean, that's not okay. And so the more that we engage and the more that we show that we have the ability to lead, and not just in communities of color, my district has never been a majority minority district. Neither is Christina's district that she's running in now. I think it's important for us to be seen and be heard and be accepted as leaders and viable options as leaders. People recruit, in this party all the time. They recruit candidates all the time, and they don't recruit candidates of color. And I think that's something that we really have to hold the Democratic Party accountable for. But it's also, our responsibility to engage too. So I'm here to hopefully, participate in the discussion and, see what you guys have to say. Thank you.
I think we momentarily lost Nico, who is our moderator. So I'm going to take a look at one of our questions. Hi, everyone. For those joining in, speaking from off screen is Elise Schrock. I'm president of the Indiana Democratic Latino Caucus. And I'd like to ask this first question to a couple of our local level leaders. Monica, what made you decide to run for office and take the step to put your name to a ballot, and how can we inspire other community leaders to do the same?
I think for many progressives, the crush of 2016 was a wake-up call. So I had been nursing that dream since then. And when I came back to Lafayette, I thought about running for a trustee on an advisory board for the township. And as I talked to the party, they kept nudging me to move my ambitions up. So go for county council. And that was a place where I thought I would get to eventually, maybe 5-10 years down the road, till I paid my dues. But then I thought, I'm turning 40 this year. It's got to happen now or never. So with the backing of the party and other progressive organizations like Greater Lafayette Indivisible, who encouraged me and supported me, I threw in my hat. And it was a challenge because there were 6 of us running for 3 at-large seats, and I am the front runner. So that, I think that says something.
I'm sorry for any technical difficulties that I just had right there. So the question that you were asked, Regis, how do you get more? What question was just asked? I'm sorry, I just need to catch up on everything that was happening. I apologize.
Why did you decide to run for office? And I might have missed the second question.
Okay. And then so you just got asked, was anyone else asked the question already? So I can just kind of keep this flowing in the order that it was there.
No.
No, it was the first one.
All right, well then let's move on to Representative Candelaria Reardon.
Okay, well, the truth of the matter is that when I decided to run for Congress, the first time I decided to run, I was like many women. I waited to be asked. I didn't see myself as a leader. And while I had always been doing things to be impactful in the community, I didn't really see myself that way. And it took others to push me in that direction. This time around, when I chose to run for Congress, it wasn't that way. I looked at the field and said, I can do that and I can do it better. And I still, regardless of the results of the election or not, I still believe I was the most qualified for the position and the most experienced. But, and had I been a middle-aged white guy with the endorsement of the outgoing congressman, certainly things would be different. But I chose to run because I really believe that I was the best candidate for that race. And I think that we have to start believing that about ourselves as a community as well.
All right, Christina Hale.
Well, like Mara, I didn't see myself as a candidate when I first ran for office either. I got asked by a friend. I wasn't really recruited, and I really needed that outside perspective to see myself as that kind of, as being worthy. And I want to encourage everybody on this call too, do not wait to be perfect. Don't wait to have every last thing figured out about air quality and curbs and sewers, or, that day will never come. We need people who reflect our community, good hearts and good minds to the job, people who are in it for the right reasons. And we absolutely need to grow representation. And Representative Harris made a point earlier. There are a lot of roles that you can pursue. And I think you should. I was a staffer and worked for state government before I ever ran for office, although that wasn't where I spent most of my career. But I want to ask you all to consider positional leadership and the fact that you really should be a decision maker and not just a helper. And please consider this, the universe tapping you on the shoulder right now, because to have that vote, to be able to introduce legislation, to be able to, say you're running for mayor, and to take care of your people during a pandemic and a crisis of social concern like we're experiencing in terms of the protests against civil injustice and murder. We need the right people in the right places who are empowered to do that. And you just have to be good and do your homework and like Mara said, she was the most experienced and would be, and I hope one day she is serving in Washington, D.C. I believe she very well might do that, but just please don't be afraid to forge your own path and step up and say, yeah, I can do that too.
Okay, Representative Harris.
Sure. So as I mentioned, I'm following in the footsteps of my parents. Running for office is something that was not really a high priority for me. My background is in television video production. There were multiple offices my father wanted me to run for, and I always said no. And you know, you lose a parent and your life changes. And so after the dust kind of settled, after, you know, the funeral and all of that, as my mother and I, I'm an only child, so it's mom and I, we were just kind of going through and getting things, you know, taken care of, you have to take care of here at home in East Chicago and at the State House. And what was happening is people here and in Indianapolis were saying to my mother, Donna's her name, Donna, you need to run. And then they pointed at me and said, and you're next. And it was not something, you know, we were obviously dealing with the loss of my father. It was not something we were both focused on or thinking about until people started saying something. And we had some conversation and decided that, you know, we wanted to do this. It was something we wanted to do to continue the legacy of my father, you know, add some other things to it. And I want to tell a real quick story. You know, when my mother was in office and we would go to different events around here, as an example, Debbie Bolaños, who I know Mara knows and maybe some of the others of you know, it was an event that she has at Washington Park here in East Chicago. And, you know, my mother was introduced and she spoke. And, you know, all these little girls, all these little Latina girls are coming around mom and they're talking to her and they're asking her questions and all of this. And when we got back in the car, I said, you know, Mom, you really have become a role model. I mean, you're looking at little girls, little Latina girls that are looking at you going, wow, someone that looks like me is in this position. That means a lot. And so, you know, being one of the two Latinos in the State House with Mara, it's been a big deal to get young people involved. And I don't want to get into all of it right now, but I know one of the things that I have to work on now that Mara's gone is something she started, which is Latino Fellows Day. So when you talk about motivation also for why running, and as I explained the reason why, there's the motivation for continuing to go and continuing to do programs like that and like this to get other Latinos involved.
All right, thank you. Okay, so the next question we have for y'all is, what are some challenges that you feel the Latino community faces here in Indiana, and what steps have you taken or will you take to address them? And we're going to start this one off with Representative Candelaria Reardon.
You're muted.
I can only talk from my perspective, and you know, my perspective is a little different. Because I didn't have, I've never had a majority minority district, so I've always run it with, you know, and my district currently is probably, I don't know, less than 5% Latino. But the issues that I really saw during this campaign is that Black and brown people continue to pick unqualified, untested, inexperienced white candidates over qualified Black and brown candidates. I think that's really one of our biggest challenges, is that we think this big white savior is going to come in and take care of our communities better than one of our own. And I think that that's a big challenge. I also think that we don't have a deep bench. We don't have, you know, a padrino that's going to tap us on the shoulder and say, hey, I've cleared the path for you. I've cleared the path for you. The way the congressman did, you know, who is the son of a politician who endorsed the son of a politician. They have that generational bench that we don't have. And we've got to build that bench if we're going to move forward. We really do. And I think at all levels, I think it's a systemic problem for Democrats in general in Indiana. I think, you know, not just in the Latino community, but in general, we don't have as deep a bench. You know, they've been building this bench in the Republican Party that they tap people for the next step all the time. It doesn't happen in the Democratic Party. It certainly doesn't happen in the Latino community. We need to build our bench.
All right, so next, Christina Hale.
I think that's a great point, and Mara has done significant good in this area in terms of inspiring people, but also giving them the practical tools to begin to organize. But I think that's also what is key to much of this is getting organized and getting connected. And that's locally, but also statewide. I think that's why this caucus is really a significant thing and has so much potential. But I can't underscore enough how important it is that government reflects our community. And there are a number of things that our state needs at a state level. We need to make sure that everybody is able to have a driver's license, no matter how you came to this country, who you are, what you're doing, or we want to know that you're licensed and who you are and where you live. That's just public safety, and people need driver's licenses to go to work and to live. That's something that I hope through executive leadership or the legislature we can continue to pursue here in Indiana. But we have to ensure that people have a clear pathway to citizenship. If for no other reason, this is a talent-based economy. We want our best and brightest to succeed, to live here and grow. Indiana hasn't been growing at the pace that many other states are, and something that makes me very frustrated when we have discussions about economic development and opportunity. It's always about attracting and retaining talent. We need to grow the talent that's already here and not scare them away and charge them extra money at our public colleges and universities and hold them down and hold them back and threaten them with deportation. The people here, we need to support because someday they will be supporting us, and they're certainly already part of a robust economy paying taxes, and we need to exploit that advantage, that economic advantage for our own economic interest as Hoosiers, but also as human beings. It's just the right thing to do. And that's what I'm going to fight for if I have the opportunity to serve in Congress.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. Representative Harris.
Sure. I'm going to echo some of what has been said. You know, the bench thing is so true. You know, my father served for 33 years. People have asked me, am I going to serve that long? Well, he started younger than I was, so I don't know if I'll serve as long as he did. But I've had people talk to me, you know, even though I'm coming into finishing my 4th year in, which is not a huge amount of time, but I've had those conversations about whom will be next. And that's something that I think all of us need to think about. And again, I mentioned the program Mata started that I will continue, the Latino Fellows. That's a big part of that is the bench. And, you know, when we've done that over the time that I've been in office, we've talked to the students and said that, you know, we're not going to do this forever. We need to find people that are going to do this. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the other types of positions that are around, I think we also have to look at, you know, continuing those fights. I know we you know, one of the things I've been working on is in-state tuition, the driver's license ID, whatever you want to call it or whatever it should be. But then we also have other things that are important to Latinos that are not just those things that are looked at as important to Latinos only. You know, when you talk about healthcare, you talk about education. One of the things that COVID-19, Corona has brought out are huge disparities of what's going on in terms of healthcare, in terms of careers. You know, the talk of how it's predominantly the high numbers of Black and brown people that are getting it is because of the types of jobs that Black and brown people have, and those essential jobs. You know, we talk about working at a gas station, working at a grocery store, you know, there's a long list of things. A side note, it's kind of important now what we look at as essential. And then looking at, you know, the economic part of how we spend our dollar and making that voice known. You know, economics drives a lot of things. I know we have a lot of issues when you talk about color in this country, but that color green is still a huge thing. So we need to understand the economic value that we have as Latinos and use that to get things done and move things in the right direction.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Could I interrupt on that one?
Yes, go ahead.
Thanks. I think everything that Mara and Earl said about the bench is true, and we do have to grow a bench, but I also want to encourage everyone, don't pay attention to that bench. If that bench doesn't look like you, or if you think it's the fix is in or something, please don't let that hold you back. It hasn't let it hold us back. I mean, I was never one of the insiders. I don't have some legacy or hands up. And, you know, sometimes you have to challenge the bench. And when you do pursue these kinds of things, just be prepared. Some people you're going to count on are going to break your heart, even within your own tribe or party. I promise you that will happen. And I also promise you people will come out of nowhere that you didn't even know existed. And you'll be a candidate, you'll step up and you'll think, I could have never done it without them. And you didn't even know they existed at the beginning. So a big piece of this too is just getting over yourself, letting those fears go, and just stepping up to say, how about me? And if you're lucky, you'll be part of the bench, but maybe you just have to be entrepreneurial and go for it on your own until years down the road we're a bit more organized and together.
All right, thanks for that. I'm going to move on to Pablo. Also, I realize I may have skipped you on a question, so please, if you could answer not just this current question, but the previous question as well, please use your time for both of those.
Yeah, so the first question was why I got involved, correct? Okay, so I'm a first generation immigrant. Well, my dad came here when he was 18 years old, and I grew up on the lower economic area of our city. And I wasn't really involved in politics, but I noticed, you know, just growing up, representation matters, whether it's in entertainment or media, or especially, you know, with elected officials. And I didn't see myself getting involved until 2016. I think it kind of forced everyone to get involved and step up, and because a lot of the issues that do get brought up aren't just political issues, you know, they're family issues, they're life issues with especially Latinos. When it comes to immigration, it's not just something that's happening, it's something that, you know, is next door or in the next room. So that made me get involved, and I wasn't involved with the party until, you know, 2018, and I started working with candidates who are running on a state level and on a county level and on a, for president, for canvassing and knocking on doors and just being involved in the community, and from speaking with community members and being told, you know, how people don't see themselves represented, whether it's Latinos or whether it's just somebody who comes from your neighborhood and somebody who you can relate to and understands some of the struggles, some of the things people go through. So that kind of made me want to get involved. And I didn't plan on running, like you said, because you have this idea that a candidate needs to be somebody, you know, who, you know, has this super long line of experience of things that they've done, and thought, you know, maybe I'd wait till 2024 or sometime down the line. But unfortunately, these issues aren't something that can just wait. You know, when you have friends who have to leave or family members who have to leave, you have to step up and kind of speak for people who need to see themselves represented and do your best to try to help them. And the second question was?
I can restate it. It's what issues do you see that affect the Latino community here? What challenges and issues that they have here in Indiana?
I think with a lot of political circles, unfortunately, it can seem kind of like an inside circle, especially for people who maybe don't have a college education. It tends to be a lot of people who are in lower and middle income areas, and they feel they can't really step into that bubble because you think of it to be some high education Ivy League bubble, and it's outside of your circle of expertise. So just letting people know, letting community members know that the issues affect all of us, and no matter what, they have a right to speak up. And sorry if you hear my dogs, they're outside. That they can speak up and they can, do something to, affect the policies, whether it's on a local or a national level. I think locally, we have something that I'm standing behind a lot, and that's protecting tenants and protecting renters from, landlords who tend to abuse their power a lot. And unfortunately, it does happen in lower economic areas. And it kind of forces people to stay in their area. It keeps a lot of communities segregated. We see that here in Fort Wayne, where you see a huge segregation in our communities, and it's been like that. I'm 27, and it's been like that my entire life that I've lived here. So it's something we have to change with the rules and the what we allow landlords to do, and how we allow them to basically keep people in the same area for their entire lives because of one thing or another. So letting Latinos know that they can be involved and they can, make a change, and then protecting those who live here and who maybe want to move somewhere else and can't because of those practices.
All right, great answer. Thank you so much. So we're going to move on. We've got a lot of questions kind of pouring in, so I'm just going to go from the stuff that yes.
I didn't
Monica, I apologize. Sorry, there's just a lot of questions coming in. I apologize.
You got a lot of
go ahead,
panelists.
Monica.
No, that's okay. No, I think the most pressing thing, as Representative Harris said, is COVID-19 and the disparities that we've seen come out of the pandemic. The fact that twice as many Latinos get sick, the fact that in neighboring counties like Cass County, where they have meat packaging plants, most of their workers are Latinos who have gotten infected. And the pressing thing right now for those workers is not only access to health care, but access to relief in terms of getting food, in terms of unemployment. And I'll tell you that that's been a really desperate need in my community, because a lot of the clients I see are undocumented. So they don't have access to the stimulus package. They don't have access to unemployment. So one of the, somebody here in Tippecanoe County created a mutual aid society to help folks, particularly poor folks and folks who were affected by COVID-19, to help them out. But I saw a real need in the Latino community. So I took that mutual aid idea and I created a mutual aid society in Spanish on Facebook. So I've been trying to help folks who can't access, relief in the ways that I mentioned before. And so I've been leveraging the help from the mutual aid society from the English language to my Spanish language group. And both groups overlap, and we've pulled money, but that has been kind of a lifeline for a lot of my clients and a lot of people who are in desperate need here.
All right, awesome. That sounds like a great program. Thank you for doing that. So with that said, I will go to what some of our viewers are asking, and let's get to one of their questions. First one is from George Fernandez. He asks, we know BOLD PAC is the Congressional Hispanic Caucus super PAC and focused on supporting Hispanics in politics. Bernie Sanders did well in places like the Nevada caucus with Latinx population and has criticized super PACs. What are your thoughts on Citizens United, and how should the Latinx population approach this issue? And we are going to start with Representative Candelaria Reardon.
Thank you. I was itching to get at that one. So, those are the rules right now. Those are the rules right now. And I think that we have enough challenges as a community and as candidates, particularly as candidates of color, to not avail ourselves of all the opportunities that there are out there. I understand people's position about Citizens United, and that's the law of the land right now. And we are playing by the rules that are, by the rules of the game right now. And I think that we are already disadvantaged as candidates. If I had not had the support of Bold Pack and others to help us, Christina knows, I mean, how challenging it is to fundraise in this climate. And that's another thing. Latinos, we're not traditional political givers because we're working 17 jobs. We're trying to make ends meet, and it's very difficult. And frankly, culturally, it's very, very difficult for us to ask people for money because we don't come here for a handout. We come here to work hard. And it's a really challenging thing for us to be able to to be political givers and to understand the importance of political giving. And so I think with all of those challenges, we have to avail ourselves of the law of the land. And frankly, that's the law of the land right now. And we are, through organizations like Bold Pack and Latino Victory Fund and Poder Pack, those are the reasons that we have candidates in other states and candidates in our own state, like Christina, that are able to compete because of that kind of support system. And it's easy for Bernie Sanders to say that, I think, when, it hasn't always been his position, let's just say. How long has he been there? And so, I think that the way Latinos navigate that is to play by the rules that are of the game that exists now.
All right, thank you. We're gonna move on to Christina Hale now.
I think that's well said, Mara. And I'll tell you right now, my opponent in this congressional race has written herself a check for more than $1 million just getting out of her own primary. That was full of, there were 15 candidates in that primary and one very active super PAC, Club for Growth, that also dropped another $500,000 in that race. And I think what we need is comprehensive reform to elections. I think there are a number of good ideas out there. We need fairly drawn districts. How are we supposed to compete when the districts are sliced and diced in such a way that it's almost impossible to be elected? I think you see how expensive races can be. Well, maybe we could look to models in other countries where they even limit the election cycle or the time period when you can raise funds. But then we have, federal limits. So I can only ask an individual to write me a check for $2,800 once before the primary and then once after the primary. Now, that's all I can do. However, we've seen elections in our state in very recent years, and I'm thinking of the one when Trey Hollingsworth was a first-time candidate. There was $1 million super PAC set up to spend in his race, and I believe it was more than $1 million spent on television during that primary. He moved here from Tennessee in October before he ran for Congress. He was running against a sitting state senator who was widely known and really accomplished, a young woman. He was running against Greg Zeller, who had served as Attorney General, and it's a very, high profile name in Southern Indiana where they were running. And Trey Hollingsworth, knowing nobody, comes in and is able to do that. Why? Because his dad, rather than being able to write him a check, just set up a super PAC and donated every last penny in that PAC. That's very different than you'll see issue-oriented PACs, whether they're dedicated to certain causes or issues, or a group like the Congressional Hispanic Caucus or Latino Victory that are trying to change the complexion of Congress. So I think it's more complicated than that conversation has been had to present time. I think we need to revamp elections and bring greater transparency and just plain old fairness to them that doesn't exist today. but it's going to take a lot more than limiting super PACs and to change our elections. And I think as Americans, we have had a great deal of hubris about the integrity of our election process. And right now it's time to shine the light, be honest with ourselves, look in the mirror and do something about it. And to do that, you have to have that vote. But I'll tell you, I'm dedicated, if I'm elected, to fight for, to bring transparency, honesty, and sunlight to the American election process.
All right, thank you so much. So we're kind of running shorter on time, so I may have to split up some of the questions. We got some great questions here, but I may have to start focusing in on certain ones. For instance, right now, Dina Martinez asked, what are you doing as a candidate to make sure that our Latino communities have access to resources and information, particularly in their native tongue? I know Monica had already talked about something like this, but let's start with you, Pablo, and then we'll go to Monica to see, for y'all to answer this.
Well, we share information on our Latino Democrats of Allen County page on Facebook. We work with the community. There's a lot of different community members who are willing to help. So when election time comes around, what we tend to do is we sit down with different candidates, we have interviews, we get information on who's running, and we have these in English and Spanish, and we share these with community members, whether it's a different community location so people can know, and just sharing, where people can vote, where they can, how they can do an absentee ballot, anything really that's pertaining to the election. We share that on our page, and we share that with other community members so they can share it with people they know, whether it's local churches that are predominantly Latino and Spanish speakers, or other community organizations that have access to large amounts of people who are going to vote and who are really citizens of our community who should know this information and should be able to get to them.
All right, Monica?
Sure. So I've used that mutual aid Spanish Facebook group as a clearinghouse for information because I found that the county has just monolingual resources. So everything's in English, nothing's available in Spanish, which is a real deficit for our residents who don't speak English. So I've been pulling stuff from CDC that's in Spanish and posting it on that mutual aid Facebook page. But I've also taken opportunities to translate materials as they become available. Pablo mentioned his concern with renters and evictions. One thing that we've been pushing hard on is protecting renters from eviction. So there's a petition going around throughout the state asking our local leadership to sign off on a letter protecting renters from eviction. And I've translated that petition so that Spanish speakers can also read it, understand it, and sign off on it. So that's one of the things I've been doing. I've also been able to connect with other groups who were helping folks individually through this pandemic. So we've been able to connect and work together. So that's been great because I'd rather work smarter and not duplicate our efforts.
All right, awesome. So we're going to move on to another question I got here concerning DACA. This is from Henry Fernandez, and he asked, in a few days, the Supreme Court will issue the DACA decision. I am pessimistic that DACA students will be protected. Any thoughts about raising our community's voice? We should protest in our own downtowns immediately after the decision is published. Let's start off with Representative Harris on this one.
Yeah, this is related to a lot of the work that I've done being in. We are seeing things going on that's connected to George Floyd in terms of protest. I think that's part of what has to happen is the raising of voices and showing the importance of protecting DACA students, showing the importance, as I kind of alluded to earlier, of showing the importance of immigrants, undocumented, and the effect in this country, the positive effect, and getting the messages out. There's always this hate. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine a couple of nights ago who's white, and he was telling me about another friend of his who's like, oh, they need they need to leave, they don't pay anything. And he argued with him and said, yes, you know, even if you're undocumented, you pay taxes. You know, you don't, as a undocumented or immigrant, you don't get money for college. You have to work hard. You have to, you know, be a good citizen. If you get into trouble, your DACA status goes away. So we need to also continue to work on getting that type of information out there so people know and understand. But again, I think we're seeing what Raising Voices does, and I think that's something we'll have to see how everything plays out and respond based on that.
Christina Hale. Oop. Are you with us? Not
There we
with
go.
us?
Thank
Oh,
you.
there
Could
you
you repeat the question for me, please, Nico?
Yes. So here we go. Oh, wow. Let's see. Henry Fernandez says, in a few days, the Supreme Court will issue the DACA decision. I am pessimistic that DACA students will be protected. Any thoughts about raising our community's voice? We should protest in our downtowns immediately after the decision is published.
I think well, that doesn't, to me, it seems more of a statement and idea, and one that I agree with and support than a question. And I have to say, I agree with Henry. I am fairly pessimistic about this. That said, I find it very motivating, and it steels my resolve, because we need to, promises kept are a very important thing. And I mentioned earlier, we need this talent. We need our young people and our people who are not so young anymore to know that they're welcome, appreciated, and they have a pathway to citizenship here. And I'll tell you, why am I doing all of this? Why put myself through all of this work? And, you know, I think of what Mara just went through, walking through fire to represent people. It's not so much fun to be a public figure. You know, you're just opening yourself up to criticism. And that's from everything from haters on your Facebook page saying you look fat, and, you know, or running into them at Kroger without any makeup on, and, you know, to people wanting to complain about their curbs and sewers or something more significant. But anytime you take a position, people splash mud at you. So what gets me through, you know, what makes me want to light a blowtorch rather than curse the darkness, is that there is so much at stake right now. We are seeing that in the streets here in our capital city. We're seeing this all over our country, where people are truly suffering. And, you know, Monica brought up some great points too, just about the fact that we are unhealthier, we are less behind, we have fewer advantages on so many levels, that when these issues of significance come up, like what we do expect any moment from the Supreme Court, we've got to step up off the bench and be counted. And I think this all comes back to the first point you made with the first question, which is, you know, why you need to run for office, and why government needs to look more like our community than it does today or has in the history of this country. It's because we need people not from homogenous experience, but people who have lived this, whose families lived it, who feel it, who are suffering, those people that came down with COVID, brown, black, everyone who has really lived through the challenges of this country that grew with principles of equality, but even from the very beginning, it's never been equal. And I think you're absolutely right. And we have to stand and be counted. But what I'll finally finish by saying is I did have a real disappointment. And during my time of service in the state legislature, there was a challenge about marriage equality. And there was an attempt to define marriage as between a man and a woman in our Indiana Constitution. And it made me feel so good to see all of those people come down and protest at the State House and show up and wear red and be there and, you know, be counted and have their voice heard. And then what happened? In 2014, Indiana had the worst voter turnout of any state in the nation. So for those that have the opportunity to vote, we've got to encourage them to vote. And for people on this call and people around our state who don't have that responsibility and right yet, we'll fight for that. But until that time, please use your power of influence. I have one of my congressional fellows working on my campaign. His name is Manny. And we were having like a volunteer meetup on Zoom the other night. And he so inspired me because everybody was kind of talking about why they're there and why they're working on this campaign. And he said, I'm here because I can't vote. And this is what I can do to help put democracy forward during this election cycle. And we just have to stand up and you can keep fighting and showing up until that happens.
Do you mind if I say something on that question?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So I think right now we're in a really unique moment because of everything going on. That's why it's so important. Today I had a piece in our local Hispanic Latino newspaper, which is El Mexicano, basically letting Latinos know why it's important that we get involved with issues like this, with any issue, because whether Black Lives Matter affects everybody with, whether it's Afro-Latinos or other people of color being affected. And we're seeing right now people come out and protest. And people are noticing not just the systematic change that needs to happen with the police force across the country. It's with basically a lot of levels of our government on a local level. For example, here, locally, our protesters, unfortunately, on Friday and Saturday, we were tear gassed unlawfully and without any forewarning. And unfortunately, when it came time for our mayor, he, basically sided with the police officers who tear gassed the citizens, who maced citizens, who attacked citizens. And this will show if parts of our government are okay with things like this happening, then we need to continue speaking up, speaking out, protesting, and showing up, because it's been going on too long. And I think if we continue with what's happening right now with the protests, we can really impact a lot of change and let people know that you need to be involved. Like you said, we need to get people to vote. Indiana having such a low voter turnout, I think it's disappointing for everybody, involved here, because we're all out there for one reason, to better our community. And if our community members don't show up to better it, then, nothing's really going to happen. So I think coupling them both together with strong protest and then obviously encouraging people to vote is, really important for that reason, locally and nationally on those issues.
All right, thank you, Pablo. So we are coming to a close here. We're probably gonna run a little bit over, so we're gonna start going into closing statements here. But if you want to, maybe you could answer this question within your closing statements here. We have a question from Isaiah Hurtado. And he says, so cool to see and hear from such great candidates. Curious what they are doing / planning to do to engage Latinos in the Black Lives Matter movement and the current issues our country is facing. So if you can answer that, as well as close everything out, and then we can start to wrap things up. We will start with Representative Earl Harris.
All right, thank you. Thank you again for the opportunity to be a part of this, to be involved. I think it's important, and glad to see so many comments, besides the comments that people are posting on the chat and on the questions, also getting text messages coming in from people I know that are on. I want to talk a little bit about the Latinos and the Black Lives Matter movement. So as the half Black, half Mexican guy, this obviously hits home. One of the things I've seen on social media that I think has been great is a lot of people posting, and some of them are family members on my Mexican side, and other people I know are posting about the connections between the Black community and the Latino community. I've gotten to know, I met him through Naleo, the district attorney who's in the Corpus Christi area in Texas, where I also have family, and then found out that he's actually friends with some of my family. and he posted something about this yesterday morning. You know, there's always been a connection between the two communities, and I know there's some people that try to pit them against each other. And I actually learned this from one of my uncles, is that the second president of Mexico was half Black and half Mexican. So there's always been a connection there. And I think when we talk about working together, that's part of it. You know, Blacks being involved in the against the wall part, Latinos being involved in what's going on now. It's all about numbers. And if you grow numbers and you fight together, there's a better opportunity to make change and make difference in this world, in this country, and in this world. So to me, that's one of the pushes. I'm also the vice chair of the Black Legislative Caucus, and I will tell you, I'll give you an example. We had a meeting with the governor. This was before COVID, or before the thing with Mr. Floyd happened. And one of the things I talked to him about wasn't just the Black side, but obviously, you know, what's going on in terms of the Latino community, about getting information out. Dr. Box was there, a question about the whole, you have to have a driver's license to get tested, and the importance of not turning away undocumented people that may also have, that need to get tested for the virus as well. So there's a lot going on with both communities, and there's the importance of them working together. And then I just, again, want to encourage people, if you're involved, stay involved. If you're thinking about getting involved, get involved. Reach out to us. I talked about the Latino Fellows. You know, one of the things that I know Mara and I have done is we've told young people, if you ever want to reach out to us, you now know us, call us, email us, whatever. And so I just want to encourage people to do that. Stay involved, get involved, and we are here and happy to talk to you about what kind of involvement you can have in the future. So thank you again for the time and the opportunity.
Well, thanks for being with us. With that, we'll move on to Monica Casanova.
I think there are a lot of overlaps with Black Lives Matter and the struggles of Latinos. I think it's kind of a natural partnership, and Latinos should show up for Black Lives Matter. We had a rally here in Lafayette, and I was gratified to see a lot of Latinos and younger Latinos holding up signs that said Latinos for BLM, and tu lucha es mi lucha. So I love that, because there has been historically a division amongst us. I grew up in Southern California, and there was a lot of tension between Latinos and African Americans. I would say for people who want to get involved, talking to your local party is a way to start. But I like what Pablo did in Fort Wayne. They just created a Latino Democratic group. So if there isn't something in your community that speaks to you, start one. You know, that's a way to go. Reaching out to leaders in the community and asking them for direction and guidance. I think a lot of people just don't know where to go or where to start. And talking to people, I think, helps a lot. I think mostly we connect to people on a relationship basis. And sometimes that means getting left out of political circles and power structures. But I think it's worthwhile for those watching and those listening to get involved in any way, shape, or form, whether that's volunteering for campaigns or even running for office.
All right, thank you. All right, Representative Candelaria Reardon. You're on mute.
Hi. Well, I just want to say thank you so much to Elise and all the Latino Democrats for asking me to participate, and I will continue to be engaged, certainly. And I think, it wasn't that long ago. My parents were, so let's see, let's say 50 years ago, which sounds like a lot to you young people, but somebody who's, more than 50 years ago, my parents got married, and there was no Latino identity. It was you're Mexican or you're Puerto Rican. Those were the two groups here in Northwest Indiana at the time. There was no Latino identity. It was, and my mother's brothers for 43 years didn't talk to her because she married a Puerto Rican. So I'm half Puerto Rican and half Mexican. So I've seen firsthand what how things have changed over, you know, over time. And I think that, you know, this strife or this, you know, antagonism between the African American community or the Latino community, together we're stronger, and we know that. And we have been, you know, my parents were those Latinos that were engaged in the civil rights movement. You know, civil rights are for everybody, right? And so, you know, it was a movement started by African Americans, and Latinos came along. My parents were, you know, were part of that. And so I think it's going to continue to be about communication, and it's going to continue to be about supporting each other. And I mean, for the most of my tenure, I was a member of the Indiana Black Legislative Caucus because I didn't have a caucus as a Latina. And we have some, you know, we have the same issues plaguing our community, right? Over policing, you know, more suspensions in our, you know, in our students, you know, all of those issues, you know. And I think the other thing that we have to think about, and I wanted to leave you with this thought, is that we have to talk about, well, I know, you know, we have to make sure that people know when we are, you know, talking about the issues that are important to our community, it's not only immigration. That seems to be the only thing that people talk about when they talk about the Latino community, other, you know, outside of our community. Immigration is probably fifth on the list of things when you poll Latinos. And, you know, we have to talk about jobs, healthcare. Those are the things that are important to Latino community. Those are the things that are going to move our communities forward. And so I wanted to touch on that. And there was another question about the whole PAC thing, and that there's other Latino candidates. I just want to address this real quick, that there's other candidates that have been, other Latino candidates have been successful in not taking PAC money. And, you know, some of those candidates come out of places like Texas, where the Latino population is almost 40%. We're not in that in Indiana. There's places in this world where that doesn't exist. So we have to continue to avail ourselves of certainly the you know, existing structure if we're going to be successful. So I just want to thank you for having me. And as I tell, you know, Earl and I talked about this. We talk about this with our Latino pages all the time, our Latino Fellows program, which, if you don't know, it's a program that brings high school students to the State House. We ask every high school in Indiana to send us 5 students. We have an entire full day of activities for the students. They do a mock session. They get to meet the governor if he's in residence. They get to meet their own state representatives. They get a tour of the Capitol. They get a financial aid workshop. So it's a full day of activities. So if you have siblings or primos or primas that you want to send to us, or to send to Earl now, because I'll be gone, but it's a program that certainly has been successful in exposing our children to state government and to elected office. And so it's really important that we continue that. It was 15 kids when I started, and now we had 185 kids this year from 17 counties. So it's really important, and I'm glad that Representative Harris is going to continue the program. But it's things like that that are going to make the difference in our community. They're going to help us build our own bench. I'm not talking about the overall Democrat bench, but certainly our own bench. We have a big pool of talent. My favorite moment this year, when the Latino Fellows program got to meet the governor, a kid in the crowd raised his hand and he said, Governor, I have a question. And the governor said, what's your question, son? And he said, I want to know if you'll endorse me for sophomore class president. When do our kids get that access and that opportunity to ask the governor questions? It's about exposure, and that's the way we're going to grow and change our political dynamic in Indiana, is to expose our children and give them an opportunity to be in the room. So now, all of you that I didn't know before, I'm going to close it with the way we do our Latino Fellows program. Now you know me. If I can ever be a resource to you, please feel free to call on me. Those watching, those on the panel, I'm happy to help in any way that I can. So please reach out to me. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. And I often share your sentiment about the immigration issues as well. I talk a lot in the 9th District about those issues and how it's not the only issue that the community is concerned with. So we're going to close it out here with Pablo.
So when it comes to the being engaged in the Black Lives Matter movement, I think that's something that's really important to let people know is, that those issues do affect Latinos. Police brutality affects Latinos. You have, even though you have, Sandra Bland or Philando Castile, Ahmaud Arbery or George Floyd or so many others, you have people like Ruben Garcia Villapando, which he was murdered by police in 2015 in Texas. So these are issues that span, across, all people of color. So we need to be out there supporting one another because ultimately it affects all of us. And what I tell people when it comes to being engaged in those spaces is to, elevate Black voices. That's what you want to do. We can tend to center ourselves when we are involved with the issues or trying to move to kind of gain some ground. And something that you want to do instead is to get Black voices in your community so you can build new leaders and you can get new people involved and they can continue to do that. And we can just continue having this progressive movement where we will impact change and it'll continue down the line as opposed to having, a few people start it. But, once they're done, somebody else isn't there to take up the mantle or to continue what's happening. So get involved with the movements, listen to the people who are there and support in the best way you can while acknowledging that their voices need to be heard over everybody else's. And I think it's important to get your community engaged, in everything, making sure that they're represented. Something that we are doing here in Fort Wayne is building a network of Latinos so they can feel supported and know that there are people who are working toward progressive change and there are outlets that they can reach out to, whether they need assistance with, with healthcare or with knowing more about how elections work or knowing something on the county level. There are resources for them to do that. So that's something that we're really pushing a lot with our caucus in Allen County, is basically giving a center to Latinos where they can come and ask those questions without feeling embarrassed or feeling like they should just forget about it because it's not worth getting involved in. So thank you for having me on here. I appreciate, everybody coming out here. It's really awesome and amazing to see Latinos in these positions and, obviously working to make change because unfortunately we don't really see that a lot. And we haven't seen that, especially here in Indiana. So, to everybody who's running or who is elected, I appreciate all of you because when everybody else is looking for leaders, you're the people we're looking to. So
Thank you, Pablo. And thank you to all our panelists for being here. Some of them had to leave. We're kind of already bleeding over, but I'm just going to end it here with some closing statements. Please engage with us on our social media. We do have a Facebook page for the statewide caucus, Indiana Latino Democratic Caucus. Just search that on Facebook. It'll be there. Again, our Twitter handle is @INLatinoDems. Let us know how we can support your local efforts. Please reach out to us to let us know how we can help in any way. For everyone who is a panelist, if anyone who's watching, you should check in the chat. We linked all the pages for everyone who's here, social media pages and things like that, any information you may need for anyone who is talking. I think that's, here we go. Lisa's sharing the screen. We've also got this convention happening 9 a.m. next Saturday. That's not tomorrow, but the next Saturday. So next Saturday, June 13th, 9 a.m., we've got a caucus convention meeting. So please join us there for more stuff. Thanks again for being here. Please shoot us any questions you may have on any of our social media, or just if they're geared toward the candidate, please reach out to the candidates. And if you're in the area, please help them as much as you can. But yeah, with that, everyone have a great Friday, and I hope you all have a great weekend.
Yeah.